The morning sun was just breaking over the Rocky Mountains when Jake heard the sound that changed everything. It wasn't thunder, though it shook the ground like an earthquake. As a former Army medic who now worked mountain rescue, he'd heard plenty of aircraft crashes before. But this was different. The sound was deeper, stranger, like metal screaming through dimensions. Jake grabbed his medical kit and headed toward the smoke rising from the valley below. His cabin sat high in the Colorado wilderness, miles from the nearest road. Whatever had crashed out there, help wouldn't arrive for hours. If there were survivors, he was their only chance. The trek down the mountain took 20 minutes of hard hiking through dense pine forest. When he finally reached the crash site, Jake stopped dead in his tracks. The object buried in the rocky slope wasn't any aircraft he'd ever seen. It looked like a giant silver teardrop, about the size of a small house, with strange symbols glowing faintly along its surface. The metal seemed to ripple like liquid, yet appeared solid to the eye. Steam hissed from cracks in the hull. Jake approached carefully, his military training kicking in. Unknown aircraft meant unknown dangers. Chemical leaks, radiation, who knew what else? But as he got closer, he heard something that made him forget caution entirely. Someone was inside, crying out in what sounded like pain. The entry hatch had been torn open in the crash. Jake peered inside, and his world tilted sideways. The interior was filled with soft blue light emanating from crystalline panels. Everything curved and flowed like the inside of a seashell. And there, collapsed near what might have been a control panel, was a being unlike anything in his wildest imagination. She was roughly human in shape, but clearly not human. Her skin had a translucent quality like frosted glass, with a pale blue tint that seemed to pulse with inner light. Her hair fell like liquid silver around delicate features that were both alien and somehow familiar. She wore clothing that seemed to be made of the same flowing metal as her ship, conforming to her body like a second skin. But what struck Jake most was how fragile she looked. Her breathing was labored and painful. Her skin, which he guessed should have been bright blue, was fading to gray. She was dying, and he could see it happening before his eyes. The being noticed him and tried to sit up. A device at her throat began to glow, and suddenly Jake could understand her words, though she wasn't speaking English. "Please," she whispered, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I don't have much time. My ship's life support failed during the emergency landing. Your atmosphere, it's toxic to my kind." Jake's medical training took over. He'd seen oxygen poisoning before in deep-sea divers. Too much oxygen could be just as deadly as too little, but he'd never treated an alien before. Everything he knew about medicine might be useless here. "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling beside her and checking what he assumed was her pulse. Her wrist felt ice cold, and the rhythm was irregular, like a butterfly's heartbeat. "Zara," she managed to say. I was princess of the Zirion Empire, but none of that matters now. I'm dying, and my enemies will find me soon." Enemies. Jake filed that information away for later. Right now, his patient was fading fast. Her translucent skin was becoming more gray by the minute, and her breathing was getting shallower. "What do you need?" Jake asked. "Medicine? Different air mixture? I have an oxygen tank in my kit, but if your atmosphere is different..." Zara's eyes widened with something like hope. "Your blood," she whispered. "In the old stories, there were legends about compatible species. Your blood chemistry might neutralize the toxins, but it's impossible. The chances are millions to one." Jake stared at her. She was asking him to give his blood to an alien being. Everything rational in his mind screamed that this was insane. Human blood wasn't compatible with alien biology. He could end up harming her instead of helping. Worse, he might contaminate himself with unknown alien diseases. But looking at Zara's fading form, Jake realized rational thought had already left the building. This was a person in front of him, alien or not. She was scared, alone, and dying. He'd taken an oath long ago to help those in need, no matter who they were. "Okay," he said simply. "Let's try it." Jake pulled out his emergency medical supplies. He had a basic transfusion kit for trauma situations, designed for battlefield medicine. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, setting up the tubing and sterilizing the connection points. Zara watched with growing amazement as he prepared everything. "You're doing this without question," she said softly. "Your people? They must be brave." "Sometimes we're just stubborn," Jake replied, sliding the needle into his arm. "And sometimes that's the same thing." The blood began to flow through the clear tubing, bright red against the alien technology surrounding them. Jake carefully inserted the other end into what appeared to be a major blood vessel in Zara's arm, though her anatomy was different enough that he had to guess at the best spot. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Zara continued to fade, her skin growing grayer by the second. Jake began to think he'd made a terrible mistake. Then her body convulsed violently, and her eyes rolled back. Every monitor and crystal panel in the ship began flashing red. She was flatlining. Jake had seen enough death to recognize it, even in an alien form. Her skin had gone completely gray, like ash. No pulse, no breathing. Whatever biological processes kept her alive had stopped completely. "Come on," Jake muttered, checking the transfusion line. The blood was still flowing, but into what was now essentially a corpse. "Come on, don't you dare die on me." He was about to start CPR, though he had no idea if chest compressions would even work on her physiology, when something incredible happened. A warm golden light began to emanate from Zara's body, starting at the point where his blood entered, her system, and spreading outward like sunrise. The light grew brighter, filling the entire ship with warmth. Jake felt a strange tingling sensation in his own arm, as if electricity was running backward through the transfusion line. Zara's skin began to change, the gray fading away as blue returned, but now with threads of gold running through it like veins of precious metal. Her eyes snapped open, no longer the pale blue he'd first seen, but now containing flecks of warm amber that seemed to dance with inner fire. She took a deep, shuddering breath, then another. The color continued to return to her features, but she looked different now. Still alien, still beautiful, but somehow changed in a way Jake couldn't. "Quite divine. What happened?" she whispered, staring at her own hands in amazement. "I feel different, stronger." Jake was wondering the same thing. The tingling sensation in his arm had spread throughout his body. He felt incredibly alert, as if every sense had been sharpened. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds more clear. When he looked at Zara, he could swear he sensed something beyond just sight, like an emotional echo he couldn't quite grasp. "I don't know," he admitted, carefully removing the transfusion equipment. "But whatever just happened, I don't think either of us will ever be the same." Outside the crashed ship, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Neither Jake nor Zara knew it yet, but those clouds carried more than just rain. Somewhere among the stars, sensors had detected the energy signature of what had just occurred. Ships were already changing course, heading for Earth. The blood of a human warrior had indeed saved an alien princess. But in doing so, Jake had just announced to the galaxy that humanity was no longer alone. And not everyone out there was friendly. 2 days had passed since the transfusion, and Jake was starting to question his own sanity. Everything felt different now, like he was living in a world that had suddenly become more real than real. Colors were brighter, sounds were clearer, and sometimes he could swear he was hearing thoughts that weren't his own. Zara had insisted on staying in his mountain cabin rather than her damaged ship. She claimed the technology needed time to repair itself, but Jake suspected there was more to it. Every time he looked at her, he felt a strange warmth in his chest, as if an invisible thread connected them. When she smiled, he found himself smiling too, for no reason he could explain. The alien princess had changed dramatically since the transfusion. Her skin still held that translucent blue quality, but now golden veins pulsed gently beneath the surface, creating patterns that shifted like living artwork. More importantly, she seemed perfectly comfortable breathing Earth's atmosphere, something she'd claimed was impossible for her species. "Jake," Zara called from the kitchen where she was attempting to understand human food. "This substance you call coffee, it's fascinating. The chemical structure is unlike anything in the known galaxy." He found her staring intently at a simple mug, as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Over the past 2 days, she'd shown the same intense curiosity about everything, from his wooden furniture to his old military photos. It was endearing and slightly overwhelming at the same time. "Most people just drink it to wake up," Jake said, pouring himself a cup. As he handed it to her, their fingers touched briefly, and he felt that strange tingling sensation again. This time, though, something else happened. For just a moment, he saw a flash of images that weren't his memories. A vast crystal city floating among the stars. Beings with Zara's translucent skin moving through halls of living light. And darkness. Ships burning. People screaming. Someone with cold, calculating eyes giving orders to destroy everything beautiful in the universe. Jake jerked his hand back, spilling coffee on the counter. "What was that?" Zara's golden eyes widened with alarm. "You saw my memories," she whispered. "That's impossible. Only bonded pairs can share consciousness, and that requires—" She trailed off, staring at him with something like fear. "Requires—" "What?" Jake pressed. "A blood bond," she said quietly. "Among my people, it's the most sacred connection possible. When two beings share life essence, they become linked not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. It only works between compatible souls, and it's supposed to be impossible across different species." Jake sat down heavily in his kitchen chair. The past 2 days suddenly made more sense. The strange sensations, the way he could almost read, her moods, the feeling that she was somehow becoming part of him. "So we're what, connected now?" "More than connected," Zara said, settling into the chair across from him. "Jake, I need to tell you who I really am. What you've gotten yourself into by saving me." She took a deep breath, and Jake could feel her nervousness as if it were his own emotion. "I'm not just any princess. I'm the heir to the Xerian Empire, which spans 12 solar systems and contains billions of beings. My parents ruled justly for 3 centuries, but they were murdered 6 months ago by someone who wanted the throne for himself." The kitchen felt suddenly too small as the weight of her words settled over them. Jake had saved the ruler of an interstellar empire. "Who killed them?" "General Vextar," she said, and Jake felt a wave of revulsion flow through their connection. "He was my father's most trusted advisor and my intended husband. The marriage was arranged to unite 2 powerful families, but Vexatar decided he didn't want to wait for my parents to step down naturally." Jake watched as pain flickered across her features. Through their bond, he could feel the depth of her loss. It was like losing family members he'd never met, but somehow knew intimately. "He's hunting me now," Zara continued. "I escaped during the coup, but barely. My ship was damaged in the fight, which is why I crashed here. If he finds me, he'll eliminate any witnesses to prevent word of his crimes from spreading." "Any witnesses," Jake repeated slowly, "including me." "Including your entire planet if necessary," Zara said grimly. "Vextar believes power comes from fear. He's already destroyed 2 worlds that refuse to submit to his rule. Earth would just be another example to keep the rest of the Empire in line." Jake stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful mountain landscape. 48 hours ago, his biggest worry had been whether his truck would make it through another winter. Now, he was apparently connected to an alien princess who was being hunted by an intergalactic tyrant. "There's something else," Zara said softly behind him. "The blood bond we share. By the laws of my people, it means we're essentially married, life partners. It's not something that can be undone." Jake turned around slowly. "Married?" "I know how it sounds," she said quickly. "You didn't choose this. Neither did I. But the bond exists now, and it's changing us both. Haven't you noticed the differences?" He had noticed. His reflexes were faster, his strength had increased, and his mind felt sharper than ever before. This morning, he'd accidentally crushed a coffee mug in his grip without realizing how hard he was squeezing. "What's happening to me?" he asked. "You're gaining some of my abilities," Zara explained. "Enhanced physical capabilities, heightened senses, possibly even limited telepathy. Meanwhile, I'm adapting to your world in ways that should be biologically impossible. We're becoming something new, Jake, something that's never existed before." Before Jake could respond, they both felt it at the same time. A presence at the edge of their shared consciousness, cold and calculating and definitely not human. Zara's face went pale. "They've found me," she whispered. "Vextar's hunters are here." Jake looked out the window again, but the mountain landscape appeared unchanged. "I don't see anything." "They're using cloaking technology," Zara said, moving quickly to gather what few possessions she'd brought from her ship. "We have maybe an hour before they pinpoint our exact location." "We?" Jake asked. Zara stopped and looked at him, her golden eyes filled with anguish. "I have to leave, Jake. It's the only way to protect you and your world. If I surrender myself, maybe Vextar will be satisfied and leave Earth alone." "Like hell," Jake said firmly. "First of all, you just told me we're bonded for life. Second, I'm not about to let some space tyrant threaten my planet. And third," he paused, realizing something important, "I'm not letting you face this alone." Through their connection, he felt Zara's surprise and gratitude. "You don't understand what you're saying. These aren't human soldiers, Jake. They have weapons that can level cities, armor that can deflect any earthly weapon." Jake walked to his closet and pulled out a case he hadn't opened in years. Inside lay his military gear, kept maintained out, of habit more than necessity. "Maybe," he said, checking his rifle, "but they've never fought someone with your abilities running through his veins." As if to prove his point, he moved faster than should have been humanly possible, reassembling the weapon with fluid precision. Zara watched in amazement as Jake transformed from a quiet mountain man into something that looked very much like a warrior. "Besides," he said with a grim smile, "I've got something they don't expect. A human who's not entirely human anymore, fighting for someone he's connected to on a level they can't understand." Outside, storm clouds were gathering again, but this time they brought more than rain. Somewhere in those clouds, advanced sensors were scanning, hunting, preparing to descend on the small cabin where two very different worlds had become one. The bond between Jake and Zara pulsed with shared determination. Neither knew what the next few hours would bring, but they would face it together. The blood that had saved a dying princess was about to be tested in ways that would determine the fate of two entire civilizations. The attack came at sunset, just as Jake was loading supplies into his truck. He felt them before he saw them, a cold presence pressing against his mind like ice water. Through his bond with Zara, he sensed her terror spike as three sleek ships materialized out of thin air above the tree line. "Jake, get down!" Zara shouted, but he was already moving with speed that surprised even him. His enhanced reflexes kicked in as energy beams scorched the ground where he'd been standing moments before. The alien ships were beautiful in a deadly way, like silver teardrops that moved without sound through the mountain air. They circled the cabin like predators, their weapons charging with an ominous blue glow. Jake could see figures moving inside the transparent sections of the hulls, beings that looked similar to Zara but wearing dark armor that seemed to absorb light. "Zarion hunters," Zara said grimly, joining him behind his overturned truck. "The best soldiers in the galaxy. They're trained from childhood to track and capture targets across any terrain, any world." Another energy blast turned a nearby pine tree into ash in seconds. Jake watched the destruction with growing anger. These invaders had come to his mountains, threatened his world, and now they were trying to take Zara away. Something primal and protective roared to life inside him. "How many?" he asked, checking his rifle. "Usually they work in teams of 6, Zara replied. "2 ships provide air support while ground teams move in from multiple angles. Your weapons won't penetrate their armor, Jake. We need to run." But Jake was already moving, and to his amazement, he found himself thinking 3 moves ahead of his enemies. It was as if Zara's tactical knowledge was flowing through their bond, combining with his military training to create something new. He rolled behind a boulder just as another energy beam split the air where his head had been. "Running won't work," he called back to her. "They'll just track us down. We need to even the odds." From his new position, Jake could see the lead hunter stepping out of his ship. The being was tall and lean like Zara, but where she had warmth and beauty, this creature radiated cold menace. His armor was black as space, and his eyes glowed with red light behind his helmet. "Princess Zara," the hunter called out in heavily, accented English, his translator making his voice sound mechanical. "I am Commander Drex. Surrender now, and we will make your death quick. Continue to resist, and we will turn this entire mountain range to glass." Jake felt rage surge through their mental connection, but it wasn't his own emotion. Zara's anger was like molten gold, burning away her fear and replacing it with royal fury. "Drex!" she shouted back, standing up despite Jake's attempt to pull her down. "I should have known Vexitar would send his pet assassin, still following orders like a good little soldier." The hunter's red eyes flared brighter. "You will show respect to your new emperor. Vexitar rules the Zarion Empire now, and he has decided you are no longer useful alive." "Then come and collect me," Zara challenged. Jake stared at her in disbelief. "What are you doing?" "Trust me," she whispered through their bond. "I know Drex. He's arrogant and impatient. If we can make him angry enough, he'll make mistakes." Sure enough, Commander Drex signaled to his troops and began advancing toward their position. But as he moved, Jake noticed something interesting. The hunter's attention was completely focused on Zara. He seemed to barely register that she had a human companion, dismissing Jake as unimportant. That was his first mistake. Jake moved like a shadow, using skills he didn't remember learning. His enhanced abilities let him cover ground silently and quickly, circling around behind the advancing aliens. Through his connection with Zara, he could sense exactly where each hunter was positioned, as if he had supernatural awareness of the battlefield. The second mistake came when Drex got within 50 yards of Zara's position. Jake could see the hunter was preparing to fire some kind of stunning weapon, probably planning to take her alive for Vexitar's entertainment. But Drex had never fought someone with Zarion combat instincts running through human determination. Jake struck like lightning, emerging from behind a tree and tackling the commander before he could react. The impact sent them both rolling down the rocky slope, Drex's weapon flying off into the darkness. The alien was strong, incredibly strong. But Jake's enhanced muscles and human unpredictability caught him off guard. "Impossible!" Drex hissed as they fought. "You're just a primitive human. You shouldn't be able to touch me." "Maybe," Jake grunted, landing a solid punch to the hunter's jaw. "But I'm not just human anymore." As they wrestled, Jake felt something extraordinary happen. Combat techniques he'd never learned flooded his mind through his bond with Zara. Zarion fighting styles that had been perfected over centuries combined with his human adaptability and military training. He moved with deadly grace, striking pressure points he shouldn't have known existed. Drex realized too late that he was losing the fight. He reached for a backup weapon, but Jake was faster, grabbing the alien's wrist and applying pressure until bones cracked. The hunter cried out in pain and surprise. "You want to know what I am?" Jake asked, pressing his advantage. "I'm something new. Something your empire has never seen before. I'm a human who gave his blood to save an alien princess, and that blood bond changed both of us." Through their connection, he felt Zara's amazement and pride as she watched him fight with abilities she'd helped give him. But he also sensed her, growing alarm as more hunters moved in from other directions. "Jake, behind you!" she warned. He spun just in time to see another hunter raising a massive energy weapon. There was no way to dodge, no cover to reach in time. But Zara was already moving, her own enhanced abilities letting her leap impossible distances. She tackled Jake sideways just as the weapon fired, both of them tumbling behind a rocky outcropping as superheated plasma turned the ground to molten glass where they'd been standing. "We can't keep this up," Jake said, breathing hard. "There are too many of them." "I know," Zara replied, but her eyes had taken on a determined gleam. "That's why we're not going to fight them here." "What do you mean?" Zara pulled out a small device from her clothing, something that looked like a crystal wrapped in silver wire. "Emergency beacon. I've been avoiding using it because I wasn't sure if the resistance could reach me in time. But if we can hold out for just a few more minutes." She activated the device, and it began pulsing with soft blue light. Almost immediately, Jake felt a change in the hunter's behavior through his enhanced senses. They were getting more aggressive, more desperate. "They know help is coming," Zara explained. "Now they have to capture or eliminate me before my people arrive." The next few minutes were the longest of Jake's life. The hunters pressed their attack from all sides, using advanced weapons that turned trees to ash and melted stone. But Jake and Zara fought back with a combination that had never existed before. Human determination enhanced by alien abilities, tactics that blended two completely different ways of thinking. Just when their ammunition was running low and their cover was crumbling around them, the sky split open with thunder that wasn't thunder. A massive ship, easily 10 times the size of the hunters' vessels, materialized above the mountain. Its hull gleamed like polished silver, and symbols of authority glowed along its sides. "The resistance," Zara breathed with relief. "They found us." The hunters' ships tried to flee, but they were too slow. Beams of pure energy reached down from the larger vessel, disabling the enemy craft without destroying them completely. Within moments, the battle was over. Jake sat back against a boulder, hardly believing they'd survived. Through his bond with Zara, he could feel her exhaustion and relief mixing with his own. But he could also sense something else: determination. This fight was over, but the war was just beginning. As figures began descending from the resistance ship, Jake realized his quiet life in the mountains was truly finished. He was part of something bigger now, something that would determine the fate of worlds, and somehow that felt exactly right. The resistance ship was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. Walking through its corridors felt like moving inside a living crystal, with walls that pulsed gently with warm light and floors that seemed to anticipate his footsteps. But what struck him most was how the Zarion crew treated him. They didn't see him as just a human who'd gotten caught up in their princess's escape. They looked at him with something close to awe. "The bondmate," he heard them whisper as he passed. "The one who saved our princess with his own life essence." Commander Kale, the leader of the resistance forces, was a tall being with silver skin. That reminded Jake of polished metal. Unlike the cold menace of the hunters, Kale radiated warmth and respect. He'd greeted Jake not as an outsider, but as family. "Your courage has become legend already," Kale had told him during their first meeting. Word is spreading across the Empire that Princess Zara lives, saved by a warrior from another world who gave his blood freely to preserve her life. Now, 3 days after the rescue, Jake stood in what Zara called the observation deck, watching Earth grow smaller through the massive transparent wall. They were heading toward the Zarion home system, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving more than just his planet behind. Having second thoughts? Zara asked, joining him at the viewing wall. Through their bond, he could feel her own uncertainty mixing with his. Not about helping you, Jake said honestly, but about what comes next. Your people are talking about me like I'm some kind of prophesied hero. I'm just a guy who used to fix broken bones and rescue lost hikers. Zara smiled, and Jake felt warmth flow through their connection. You're much more than that now. The medical team ran tests while you were unconscious after the battle. Jake, the changes in your body aren't just temporary. The bond has altered your DNA permanently. You can survive in space, breathe different atmospheres, even withstand radiation that would destroy most organic life. And you? He asked. I've become something new too, she admitted. I can process Earth's atmosphere perfectly now. More than that, I can adapt to any environment your species could survive in. We've both been changed by what we shared. Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The warm crystal lighting shifted to urgent red, and Commander Kale's voice echoed through the corridors. All hands to battle stations. We're under attack. Through the viewing wall, Jake could see them emerging from what looked like empty space. Vextar's warships, massive and angular like geometric nightmares. There had to be at least 20 of them, each one easily twice the size of the Resistance vessel. He followed us, Zara breathed, her face going pale. Vextar himself is here. The battle began immediately. Jake watched in fascination and horror as energy beams lanced through space, lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. The Resistance ship shook under the impact of enemy fire, and Jake could hear the crew shouting orders in their musical language. Princess, we need to get you to the escape pods, Kale announced, bursting into the observation deck. Our shields can't hold much longer. But even as he spoke, something went wrong. A massive explosion rocked the ship, and Jake felt the floor tilt sickeningly beneath his feet. Through their bond, he sensed Zara's spike of terror before she cried out and collapsed. Zara? Jake caught her as she fell, and immediately saw the problem. A piece of crystal debris from the damaged wall had struck her side, and golden blood was flowing steadily from the wound. Her skin was losing its blue radiance, fading toward the same deadly gray he'd seen in her crashed ship. The medical bay, Kyle urged. Quickly, before she loses too much life essence. They carried Zara through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting, Jake holding pressure on her wound while feeling her life slipping away through their connection. The medical bay was a chamber filled with devices that looked more like musical instruments than surgical tools, all humming with energy that seemed to respond to biological rhythms. The ship's medic, a being with skin like flowing water, examined Zara quickly. The wound is too severe, she announced grimly. She's losing life essence faster than our equipment can replace it. Without a compatible donor? Use my blood, Jake said immediately. Like before. No, Zara whispered weakly. Jake, you don't understand. A second blood sharing would make the bond permanent, irreversible. You'd never be fully human again. The medic nodded gravely. She speaks truth. A second bonding would complete the transformation for both of you. You would become something new entirely, capable of surviving in any environment either of your species could endure, but forever changed. Jake looked down at Zara, feeling her life fading through their connection. Around them, the battle raged on, and he could hear Kale shouting orders to prepare for boarding parties. Vextar's forces were overwhelming their defenses. What happens if I don't do it? Jake asked. She dies, the medic said simply. And without the princess, the resistance falls. Vextar consolidates his power over the Empire, and eventually he'll turn his attention to other worlds, including yours. Through the ship's communications, they could hear Vexatar's voice broadcasting to the resistance vessel. Surrender the false princess and her pet human, and I will grant you quick deaths. Continue to resist, and I will make your suffering legendary. Jake felt Zara's hand grip his weakly. Don't do it for me, she whispered. Don't give up your humanity for someone you've known less than a week. But Jake was already rolling up his sleeve. My humanity isn't about my DNA, he said firmly. It's about the choices I make. And I choose to save the person I care about. He looked at the medic. Do it. The second transfusion was completely different from the first. This time, Jake felt the changes happening immediately. Energy flowed between them like liquid light, and he could sense Zara's life force strengthening as his blood mixed with hers. But more than that, he could feel their minds connecting on a deeper level than ever before. Suddenly, he wasn't just Jake anymore. He was also Zara, experiencing her memories, her knowledge, her royal training. Combat techniques that had taken her decades to master flooded his consciousness. Languages spoken across 12 star systems became as familiar as English. Political intrigue and diplomatic protocol settled into his mind like they'd always been there. At the same time, he felt Zara gaining access to his own experiences. His military training, his knowledge of Earth and humanity, his simple but profound understanding of right and wrong. Through their completed bond, they became something that had never existed before. Two minds in perfect harmony, each making the other stronger. The transformation saved Zara's life, but it also announced their location to every sensor in Vextar's fleet. The energy signature of their completed bonding lit up the darkness like a beacon. He knows exactly where we are now, Kale reported grimly. All ships are converging on our position. Jake stood up, feeling power coursing through his transformed body. Through his bond with Zara, he could sense the tactical situation with perfect clarity. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. But they also had something Vextar didn't expect. A human warrior with Xerion royal abilities, and a Xerion princess with human adaptability and determination. Then let's give him what he wants, Jake said, his voice carrying new authority, but not the way he expects it. As Vextar's ships closed in for the final assault, Jake and Zara stood together, their completed bond pulsing with shared purpose. The blood that had saved an alien princess had now created something unprecedented, a bridge between two worlds, two species, two ways of thinking. The real battle was just beginning, and the fate of both Earth and the Xerion Empire hung in the balance. The final confrontation with Vextar happened not in the depths of space, but in the crystal throne room of the Xerion capital world. Jake still couldn't believe how they'd gotten there. After completing their blood bond, he and Zara had somehow managed to turn the tide of the space battle using tactics that combined human unpredictability with Xerion precision. Now they stood before the usurper emperor, surrounded by his loyal guards, but not defeated. Through their mental connection, Jake could feel Zara's royal authority reasserting itself, strengthened by his unwavering determination. So, Vextar sneered from the crystal throne that should have been Zara's. The lost princess returns with her pet alien. How touching. Jake studied the false emperor with eyes that now saw beyond the visible spectrum. Vextar was tall and imposing, with skin that shifted between silver and black like liquid metal. But through his enhanced senses, Jake could detect something the tyrant was trying to hide. Fear. I am no pet, Jake said calmly, his voice carrying new authority that made several guards step backward. I am something you've never encountered before, a bridge between worlds, created by choice rather than conquest. Vexatar laughed, but the sound was hollow. You're an abomination, a corruption of pure Xerion bloodlines. When I destroy you, the Empire will thank me for removing such contamination. Will they? Zara stepped forward, and Jake felt the full weight of her royal presence flowing through. Their bond. Look around you, Vextar. Half your guards are already questioning your rule. Word has spread that the true princess lives, bonded to a warrior from another world who gave his life essence freely to save her. It was true. Jake could sense the uncertainty in the throne room. Many of the assembled Xerion nobles were looking at him with curiosity rather than disgust. The story of his sacrifice had grown with each telling, becoming a symbol of hope in an empire that had known only fear since Vextar's coup. Enough talk, Vextar snarled, rising from the throne. Energy crackled around his hands as he prepared to strike. I will end this charade myself. But Jake was already moving, his transformed abilities letting him cross the vast throne room in seconds. Vextar's energy blast scorched empty air where Jake had been standing, and suddenly, the human was beside the Emperor, moving with combat skills that blended two worlds of fighting techniques. The battle was brief but decisive. Vextar was powerful, enhanced by stolen Xerion technology and driven by ruthless ambition. But Jake fought with something the tyrant couldn't understand. Love combined with justice, human creativity merged with alien precision. When Vextar fell, his own energy weapon turned against him. A profound silence filled the throne room. Jake stood over the defeated usurper, not breathing hard despite the intensity of the fight. Through his bond with Zara, he felt her mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but it had come at the cost of tremendous suffering across the Empire. It's over, he said simply, extending his hand to help Zara ascend to her rightful throne. But Zara shook her head. No, Jake. It's just beginning. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newest ship in the Xerion fleet, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. But this wasn't a warship or even a diplomatic vessel. It was something entirely new, a bridge ship designed to facilitate contact between species rather than conquer them. The transformation of the Xerion Empire had been remarkable, with Zara on the throne and Jake serving as her partner and Earth's first ambassador to the galaxy. They'd begun reshaping interstellar relations. The Empire's old policies of conquest and domination were being replaced by cooperation and mutual benefit. The Earth delegation is ready to meet with us, Commander Kale reported. He'd become Jake's closest friend among the Xerion people, fascinated by human perspectives on leadership and friendship. Jake nodded, straightening the formal robes that marked his position as Earth's representative. The clothing was a blend of human and Xerion design, symbolic of his dual nature. Over the past months, he'd discovered that his transformation had given him abilities he was still learning to use. He could survive in the vacuum of space, adapt to any atmosphere, and even communicate telepathically with other bonded pairs. How do I look? He asked Zara through their mental connection. Like someone who's about to change the course of history, she replied warmly. Again. The meeting took place in orbit above Earth, neutral ground for both species. Jake watched with pride as human and Xerion representatives sat together, working out the details of humanity's entry into the galactic community. It wasn't as a conquered species or even as junior partners, but as equals bringing their own unique perspectives to an ancient civilization. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Earth's lead scientist on the project, was particularly fascinated by Jake's transformation. The biological changes are remarkable, she told him during a break in negotiations. Your DNA has been rewritten at the cellular level, but you've retained everything that makes you human. It's like evolution compressed into a single moment. Maybe that's what it was, Jake replied. Evolution. Not just for me, but for both our species. The evidence supported his theory. In the months since Jake and Zara's bonding had become known, volunteers from both worlds had stepped forward, eager to undergo similar transformations. The process only worked between truly compatible individuals, but when it did work, it created beings who could serve as living bridges between civilizations. The universe is vast, Zara had told the Zarian Council when they'd questioned the wisdom of sharing their secrets with other species. We've spent centuries trying to control it through force. Perhaps it's time to try understanding it through connection. As the negotiations concluded successfully, Jake found himself thinking about the crash that had started everything. If someone had told him a year ago that he'd be serving as humanity's ambassador to an interstellar empire, bonded for life to an alien princess, and helping to reshape galactic civilization, he'd have recommended therapy. But standing here now, feeling the satisfaction of both species as they signed agreements that would benefit everyone, Jake knew he'd made the right choice. Every choice. From giving his blood to save a dying stranger, to accepting a permanent transformation, to leaving Earth behind to fight for justice among the stars. Any regrets? Zara asked, joining him at the viewport as Earth rotated slowly. Below them. Jake considered the question seriously. He'd given up his quiet life in the mountains, his purely human nature, and any chance of a normal existence. In return, he'd gained a connection deeper than anything he'd imagined possible, abilities that let him protect both worlds he now called home, and a purpose that spanned star systems. None, he said honestly. What about you? Through their bond, he felt Zara's contentment and love. I was raised to serve my people, she said. I just never imagined that would include all people, everywhere. As they watched, the first joint human-Zarian exploration vessel departed from Earth orbit, carrying a mixed crew toward distant stars. It was the beginning of a new age, one where differences were celebrated rather than feared, where evolution happened through choice rather than chance. Jake and Zara stood together, their completed bond pulsing with shared purpose and unlimited possibility. The blood of a human warrior had indeed saved an alien princess. But in doing so, it had saved something much larger, the future itself. Behind them, representatives from 12 different worlds were already making plans for the next phase of galactic cooperation. Ahead of them, the universe stretched infinite and welcoming, full of wonders waiting to be discovered by species working together rather than against each other. The story that had begun with a crash in the Colorado mountains had become the foundation for a new chapter in the history of the galaxy. And it was just the beginning.